Have you ever walked through Tomorrowland munching on your churro after beating your high score in Buzz Lightyear or screaming on Space Mountain and feeling that there's something, well, missing in this land? You're not alone, and there are very specific reasons why you may be feeling this way. Tomorrowland was meant to show us the future, but as you walk through Tomorrowland today, not only will you realize that there are abandoned spaces and infrastructure spread across the land, but the theming and storytelling here is completely fractured. You won't see a single future, but many separate futures inconsistently layered on top of each other. And recently, this idea has been back in the spotlight, with a Wall Street Journal article reigniting the conversation around the state of Tomorrowland and how a proposed makeover by Imagineering was rejected by Disney executives. But there are signs that Disney might finally be finding its path towards what a next generation Tomorrowland should be. Join me as we take a look at Tomorrowland's past, what it looks like today, and what could be in store for its future. At its peak, Tomorrowland wasn't just a collection of attractions, it was a system that launched during the 1967 World on the Move makeover, widely considered the high water mark for the land and the first truly complete realization of Walt Disney's optimistic futurism. It was the time when Tomorrowland cohesion, aesthetics, and quality of attractions was unmatched. It was a time when Disneyland featured the Carousel of Progress, Adventure Through Inner Space, the rocket jets, flight to the moon, submarine voyage, Circle Vision 360, the monorail, Skyway to Fantasyland, an updated Autopia, murals featuring original art by Mary Blair herself. And at the heart of that system was the PeopleMover. It wasn't designed to thrill or tell a story in the traditional sense. Its purpose was far more ambitious. From above, guests weren't just riding, they were observing. They saw Tomorrowland function as a living environment. Attractions connected by motion, infrastructure designed for flow, progress happening in real time. This was Tomorrowland behaving like a city of the future. The People Mover represented a concept that Disneyland rarely attempts today, that transportation on its own was inspirational. It suggested a future where movement was clean, quiet, and human centered. No traffic, no congestion, no chaos, just pure flow. And that concept of the future mattered because Tomorrowland wasn't only about destinations, it was also about how you moved between them. The People Mover closed and was eventually replaced by the rocket rods. And when that closed, something subtle but critical happened. It seemed like Tomorrowland lost its momentum and sense of motion. The track remained, looping overhead, threading through buildings, wrapping around Space Mountain, but the life was gone. What was once kinetic energy became visual clutter, a constant reminder of a future idea that still exists physically, but not philosophically. And instead of suggesting progress, the track now asks the question, if Tomorrowland is about the future, why is one of its most futuristic ideas just sitting empty and unused above our heads? When the tracks became empty, Tomorrowland's attractions became more inward facing and self contained, and Tomorrowland stopped feeling like a connected system and became just a collection. Also, as a result, the rocket rods, whether justified or not, have been blamed for killing the People Mover and heralding the demise of Tomorrowland. The Skyway once connected Tomorrowland to Fantasyland, carrying guests above rooftops, the submarine lagoon, above the monorail, and People Mover. And like the People Mover, the Skyway wasn't just transportation, it was a perspective. From above, Tomorrowland felt alive, layered, dimensional, and in motion. The land wasn't something you passed through quickly, it was something you experienced over time. When the Skyway closed, Tomorrowland lost another piece of its movement vocabulary. The land became flatter, more static, more about walking from queue to queue instead of being carried through an idea. With the loss of the Skyway and the People Mover, Tomorrowland didn't just lose rides, it lost flow. The true vision of Tomorrowland believed the future was something humanity was actively moving toward. In early Tomorrowland, Flight to the Moon, and later Mission to Mars, reflected real scientific ambition. These weren't fantasy, they were optimism rooted in reality. Even Autopia, in its earliest form, wasn't about traffic. It was about freedom, access, and innovation. The land had a thesis: technology would improve everyday life. Few buildings illustrate Tomorrowland's shift more clearly than the Carousel Theater. This rotating structure once housed Carousel of Progress, an attraction entirely dedicated to the idea that technology can improve everyday life. Scenes advanced through time, homes evolved, society moved forward. Progress wasn't only thrilling, it was hopeful. Carousel of Progress was eventually moved over to Florida, and after several rethemes, the legendary Carousel Theater now houses Star Wars Launch Bay. And while Star Wars is iconic, its presence here reveals something important. This space no longer imagines the future. It preserves a beloved franchise from the past that itself takes place in the past. The building still exists, and not only is it consuming critical real estate, its original purpose has been replaced with something static and no longer aligns with Tomorrowland's original intent. Even more telling than repurposed spaces are the ones that haven't been reused at all. Sitting empty in front of Space Mountain is the Magic Eye Theater. Once designed to showcase groundbreaking 3D films with emerging technology, such as Captain EO, this theater now sits largely unused. No active attraction, no consistent purpose, no clear future. Guests walk past it without even realizing it exists. In a land built around innovation, an abandoned theater quietly gathering dust becomes one of its strongest symbols of stagnation. Then there's the Astro Orbiter. Visually, it's one of Tomorrowland's most striking icons. Polished brass tones, rocket-shaped vehicles, a design language pulled straight from Jules Verne-style retrofuturism. And that's the problem. Astro Orbiter isn't imagining tomorrow, it's imagining how people in the past imagined tomorrow. This optimistic turn-of-the-century space fantasy sits directly alongside franchise-driven cinematic sci-fi of Star Wars, cartoon futurism of Buzz Lightyear, Autopia's real-world technology frozen in time. It's not wrong on its own, it's just telling a completely different future story than everything around it. Before the Astro Orbiter, Tomorrowland had another icon of motion and optimism, the rocket jets. Positioned high above the land and themed after the Apollo moon rockets of the 1960s, the rocket jets weren't just a spinner attraction, they were a visual exclamation point. Rockets circling the skyline told guests, "This is Tomorrowland." The future was above you, moving, alive, and visible from almost anywhere in the land. But today, the original Rocket Jet's platform sits empty. An elevated location designed to showcase motion now showcases nothing at all. The rockets themselves were relocated and reimagined as the Astro Orbiter, but the original vantage point, the idea of Tomorrowland's future rising above the land, was lost. What remains is another example of a powerful idea completely abandoned. Not removed, not replaced with something new, just left behind. Nowhere is the loss of intent more visible than the former Flight to the Moon and Mission to Mars building. What once simulated humanity's path into space now serves pizza. The structure visually still hints at ambition, but today it functions primarily as a themed restaurant. This isn't about criticizing Pizza Planet itself, it's about what the transformation represents. A space once dedicated to imagining humanity's future now exists without any forward looking purpose at all. The vision didn't evolve, it was replaced with a concept to just bring in more revenue, no less. Utopia remains, but no longer as a vision of tomorrow. What once symbolized innovation now reflects outdated technology and congestion. The submarine voyage was eventually rethemed with Pixar's Finding Nemo, admittedly a very family-friendly concept that complements a beautiful lagoon that adds a needed water feature to the land, but this theme just isn't about the future at all. These attractions still operate today, but they no longer move Tomorrowland forward. They exist without advancing the story. Upper walkways that lead nowhere, spaces designed for crowds that no longer arrive, infrastructure damaged and abandoned in plain sight for all to see. Tomorrowland still carries the skeleton of a futuristic transit system, but without the function that once justified it. In a park where every single square foot matters, this underutilization becomes impossible to ignore, especially in a land built on progress. Tomorrowland doesn't lack attractions, it lacks a point of view. Is it about space exploration, technological optimism, cinematic sci fi, cartoon futurism, Jules Verne inspired retro fantasy? Right now, it's trying to be all of them, and that's why it feels like none of them. When a land built around the future stops evolving with intention, it doesn't stay futuristic. it becomes a museum of conflicting ideas. Moving forward, Tomorrowland doesn't need to predict the future and attempt to show us what the future will look like in a literal sense. It needs to interpret it and create attractions that unify the theme. As an example, the People Mover didn't necessarily say, this exact transit system will exist. Instead, it told us the future should move smoothly, cities should flow, not clog, transportation should reduce stress, not add to it. It gave guests the feeling of what tomorrow's transportation could be. This also doesn't mean Disney's IP couldn't be used in Tomorrowland. It should just be incorporated so that it supports a cohesive theme. But there are hints that Disney might have found its way with what the next generation Tomorrowland should be. On the other side of the world, Tokyo Disneyland Space Mountain and Tomorrowland theme for 2027 appear to be a step in the right direction. It appears to lean into the sleek, bright, optimistic future aesthetic that echoes the clean mid-century future feel of 1967. Consistent with the direction of new attractions around all the Disney theme parks, Tokyo's Tomorrowland attractions are heavily IP-driven, suggesting a fun high-tech future instead of real-world innovation. In Disney's words, it represents a future where humans are in harmony with nature, incorporating various icons and design elements that will create a sense of hope for the future. Hopefully, Anaheim follows suit. To me, Disneyland is still the happiest, most magical place on Earth, with exciting attractions in store for us soon. But it will probably be into the next decade before we see another new Tomorrowland that echoes the glory of 1967's World on the Move. Until then, the People Mover track is still here, the buildings are still here, the space and the potential are still here. What Tomorrowland needs isn't another add on attraction or another retheme here and there. It needs a single, cohesive point of view. The real question isn't if Tomorrowland will be reimagined, it's when Disneyland decides it's time to move the future forward again. Be sure to subscribe as we continue to explore Disneyland's past, present, and what's next.